Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Distant Star, staring at the data screen with confusion. The readings made no sense. According to every record in the Galactic Council database, the planet below was nothing more than a dead rock. Kepler 442c had been marked as uninhabitable for over 300 years. No atmosphere worth breathing, no water, no life. Just another failed world in the vast emptiness of space. But the scanners were telling a different story. "Commander," called out Science Officer Krental from her station. "I'm reading artificial structures on the surface, metal construction, power sources, and—" She paused, checking her readings again. "Biosignatures." Veltar's 4 eyes narrowed. His blue scaled, skin rippled with concern. The Zephyrian people had been exploring space for thousands of years, and they knew a dead world when they saw one. This planet should not have any signs of life. "Are you certain about those readings?" he asked. "Yes, sir. There are definitely artificial structures down there, and the biosignatures suggest recent activity, within the last few decades at most." Veltar moved to look at the data himself. The planet's surface showed clear signs of construction. Buildings, roads, even what looked like landing pads. But who could have built them? No known species had claimed this system. The nearest inhabited world was over 50 light-years away. "Could it be a secret colony?" asked Navigation Officer Dulwen. "Maybe one of the council races established an outpost here without reporting it." "Impossible," Veltar replied. "All colonization efforts must be registered with the council. No one would risk the penalties for illegal settlement." The bridge fell silent as the crew considered the mystery. Veltar had been exploring unknown systems for most of his adult life. He had discovered new species, mapped uncharted worlds, and solved countless space mysteries. But this was different. This felt wrong somehow. "Commander," Krental said quietly, "there's something else. The energy signatures I'm reading. They don't match any known technology in our databases." Veltar felt a chill run through his body. Unknown technology usually meant one of two things. Either they had discovered a new species, or they had found something left behind by an extinct one. Neither option was particularly comforting. "Prepare a landing party," he ordered. "Full scientific, equipment and security detail. We're going down to investigate." 2 hours later, Veltar found himself standing on the surface of Kepler 442c, breathing filtered air through his environmental suit. The atmosphere was thin but not poisonous. The gravity was lighter than his home world, making each step feel strange and bouncy. The settlement spread out before them like a ghost town. Buildings made of metal and stone stood empty, their windows dark. Streets were laid out in orderly patterns, connecting different sections of the colony. It looked like a place where people had lived and worked, but now it was silent. "The construction style is unfamiliar," reported Chief Engineer Monkul. "But the materials are standard, nothing exotic or advanced. Whoever built this used basic technology and common elements." They walked through the empty streets, recording everything they saw. The buildings were clearly designed for humanoid beings. Doors were the right height for most council species. Windows were positioned at eye level. The layout suggested practical people who valued efficiency over decoration. "Commander, over here," called Security Chief Yartok from near a large building. "I found something you need to see." Veltar hurried over to where his security chief was standing. Yartok pointed to symbols carved into the metal doorframe. Strange markings that looked almost like writing, but not in any language Veltar recognized. "Can you translate it?" he asked. "No, sir. It's not in our database. But look at the design of these symbols. They're very simple, basic lines and curves, almost primitive." They entered the building and found themselves in what appeared to be a research facility. Tables covered with strange equipment lined the walls. Computer terminals sat dark and silent. Papers and data pads were scattered everywhere, as if the people who worked here had left in a hurry. Krental activated one of the computer terminals. After a few minutes of working with her translation equipment, she managed to access the data files. "Commander," she said, her voice filled with surprise, "I think I know who built this place." "Who?" "Humans." The word hit Veltar like a physical blow. Humans had been extinct for 300 years. Everyone in the galaxy knew the story. The human homeworld, Earth, had been destroyed when their sun went supernova. The entire species had been wiped out in a single day. It was one of the most famous extinctions in galactic history. "That's impossible," he said. "Humans are extinct, have been for centuries." "I know, sir, but look at this." Krental showed him the computer screen. "These files are written in human languages, English, Mandarin, Spanish. The dates show this colony was active until about 30 years ago. Veltar stared at the evidence. If this was true, it changed everything. A surviving human colony meant that one of the galaxy's most tragic stories was actually incomplete. Some humans had escaped their world's destruction and made it here. But how? He wondered aloud. Earth was in a completely different part of the galaxy. How did they get here? And why didn't they contact the Council? The team spent the rest of the day exploring the colony. They found living quarters designed for families, schools where human children had learned, recreational areas where people had relaxed after work. It was a complete society, built by survivors of a dead species. But the more they discovered, the more questions arose. The colony was far too advanced for refugees who had escaped a dying world. The technology was sophisticated, the construction was solid, and the research facilities were beyond what should have been possible for isolated survivors. "Commander," Moncul reported as the sun began to set, "I've been analyzing the construction timeline, based on the building materials and wear patterns. This colony was established approximately 200 years ago, but it was continuously improved and expanded until very recently." 200 years, Veltar repeated. That would mean these humans arrived here only about a century after Earth's destruction. How did they travel so far so quickly? "That's not the strangest part," Krental added. "The research data I've been translating suggests they were working on some very unusual projects: genetic modification, biological adaptation, cybernetic enhancement, things that most species consider too dangerous to attempt." As night fell, the landing party set up camp in the center of the colony. Veltar stood watch while his team slept, staring up at the alien stars and trying to process what they had found. A lost human colony was shocking enough, but the evidence suggested these weren't just survivors, they were something more. The biosignatures his ship had detected were still active. That meant the humans might still be here somewhere. But if they were, why hadn't they shown themselves? Why were they hiding? As he pondered these questions, Veltar noticed something moving in the shadows between buildings. Just a brief glimpse of motion, too quick to identify. He raised his energy weapon and activated his suit's night vision, but saw nothing. Probably just the wind, he told himself. But deep down, he suspected they were being watched, and whoever was doing the watching had been human once, though what they had become was still a mystery. The discovery that should have been the greatest archaeological find of the century was beginning to feel like something much more dangerous. The next morning brought new discoveries that made Veltar question everything he thought he knew about the universe. His team had worked through the night, translating data files and analyzing the colony's remains. What they found painted a picture that should have been impossible. "Commander," Krental called from the main research building. "You need to hear this." She had connected her translation equipment to the colony's central computer system. After hours of work, she had managed to access what appeared to be a complete historical record of the settlement. "I've found their arrival logs," she said. "The first entry is dated exactly 197 years ago. A ship called the Hope's Dream crash-landed here with 237 survivors." Veltar listened as the computer spoke in translated Zephyrian, reading from records written by long-dead humans. The story it told was incredible. The humans hadn't just escaped Earth's destruction. They had seen it coming. A group of scientists and engineers had been working on experimental faster-than-light travel when their sun began showing signs of instability. While the rest of humanity argued about evacuation plans that would never work, this small group had stolen their prototype ship and fled into deep space. They weren't refugees, Veltar realized. They were pioneers. They chose to leave. The records showed that the Hope's Dream had pushed its experimental engines beyond safe limits, jumping farther into unknown space than any human ship had ever traveled. They had hoped to find a suitable world somewhere in the galactic rim, far from any inhabited systems. Instead, they had found Kepler 442c. The planet wasn't suitable for human life, Krental continued reading. Radiation levels were dangerous. The atmosphere was toxic. Most of the native life forms were hostile. The crash landing damaged their ship beyond repair. They were trapped. But the humans hadn't given up. The records showed how they had adapted to their new world with shocking determination. Within the first year, they had established a basic colony. Within 5 years, they had learned to survive the planet's harsh conditions. Within 10 years, they were thriving. "How did they manage it?" asked Moncul. "Our scans show this world should be lethal to most life forms." The answer came in the form of detailed research logs that made Veltar's skin crawl. The humans had approached their survival problem like any other scientific challenge. They had studied the planet's ecosystem, analyzed its dangers, and then systematically modified themselves to overcome each obstacle. They started with simple medical treatments, Krental translated. Radiation medicine, genetic therapy for poison resistance, surgical implants to help process the atmosphere. But that was just the beginning. As the years passed, the modifications had become more extreme. The humans had experimented on themselves in ways that violated every principle of medical ethics known to galactic civilization. They had changed their own DNA, replaced organs with artificial ones, and modified their nervous systems to interface with alien technology. This data log is from 50 years after their arrival, Krental said, her voice troubled. They're describing something called Phase 2 integration. The subjects volunteered to have their bone structure altered, their muscle density increased, and their sensory organs enhanced. The success rate was 97%. Veltar felt sick. What the humans had done to themselves was horrifying. No civilized species would attempt such radical self-modification. The risks were too great, the ethical concerns too serious, but the humans had treated it as just another problem to solve. There's more, Krental continued. They didn't just modify themselves for survival. They started enhancing themselves, for advantage. Improved intelligence, faster reflexes, enhanced strength. They were trying to become something better than human. The record showed that by the colony's 100th year, the humans had established what they called adaptation protocols. Children were born with genetic modifications already in place. Adults underwent regular enhancement procedures. The entire society was built around the concept of continuous improvement through biological and technological integration. Look at this population data, said demographics specialist Woljen. They started with 237 people. After 200 years, they should have had a population in the thousands. But the records show they maintained a steady population of exactly 300 people. Birth control? Suggested Mon Cool. No, Woljen replied. Selective breeding. They were controlling their own evolution. Only the most successfully modified individuals were allowed to reproduce. They were creating a new species. The team spent the day exploring the colony's residential areas with new understanding. The houses they had thought were designed for normal humanoids were actually built for something else. The doorways were taller than necessary. The furniture was built to support greater weight. Even the beds were oversized. These people had modified themselves so extensively that they were no longer baseline human, Veltar concluded. They had become something new. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. As they explored the colony's outer areas, they found evidence of interaction with the planet's native ecosystem. The humans hadn't just adapted to survive the hostile environment, they had learned to work with it. Commander, you need to see this, called xenobiologist Terwell from the colony's edge. I've found cultivation areas where they were growing native plants. But these aren't just gardens, they've modified the plants too. The humans had somehow domesticated the planet's aggressive flora. Plants that should have been deadly to any off-world life had been altered to produce food, medicine, and materials. The modifications were so extensive that the plants no longer resembled their wild relatives. They didn't just change themselves, Terwell explained. They changed the entire ecosystem around their colony. They created a symbiotic relationship with the native life forms. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just survived on an alien world. They had transformed it into something that served their needs. They had demonstrated a level of biological manipulation that most species would consider impossible. How long ago did they leave? Veltar asked. Krental checked the most recent data files. The last entries are from about 30 years ago. But they don't mention leaving. The records just stop. Equipment failure? No, sir. The computers were shut down deliberately, and there are references to something called Phase 4 protocols that were about to begin. But there's no description of what those protocols involved. As the day ended, Veltar gathered his team to discuss their findings. What they had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about biological limits and adaptation. We need to report this to the Council, suggested Yartok. Report what? Veltar replied. That we found evidence of a human colony that conducted illegal genetic experiments for 200 years? That they modified themselves so extensively they may no longer be human? That they disappeared 30 years ago without explanation? Truth was that Veltar wasn't sure what they had found. The evidence suggested that the humans had succeeded in creating something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. But what that something was, and where it had gone, remained a mystery. Sir, Krental said quietly, there's one more thing. The computers show that the colony's sensor network is still active. It's been monitoring space traffic for decades. They knew we were coming long before we detected them. The realization hit Veltar like a physical blow. If the sensors were still active, then someone was still here to monitor them. The colony wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. And whatever the humans had become, they were watching. On the third day of exploration, Veltar's team discovered the underground levels of the research complex. What they found there would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. The entrance was hidden beneath what had appeared to be a simple storage building. Motion sensors detected the opening mechanism, revealing stairs that descended deep into the planet's crust. Emergency lighting activated as they entered, suggesting that power systems were still functional after 30 years of abandonment. "The construction down here is much more advanced," observed Monkul as they descended. "Reinforced walls, environmental controls, multiple redundant systems. They built this to last." The first level contained what appeared to be medical facilities. But as the team explored the rooms, they realized these weren't hospitals in any sense they understood. The equipment was designed for radical biological modification on a massive scale. "These aren't surgical tools," whispered Medical Officer Quental, examining the devices with professional horror. "These are designed for complete biological reconstruction. Look at this chamber. It's built to dissolve and rebuild organic tissue while keeping the subject alive." The walls were lined with tanks filled with preservative fluid. Inside the tanks floated organs that didn't belong to any known species. Hearts with multiple chambers, lungs designed for different atmospheric compositions, limbs with extra joints and enhanced muscle structure. Spare parts, Veltar realized. They were growing replacement organs for their modifications, but that was only the beginning. The second level contained something worse, the integration labs. The humans had documented everything with scientific precision. Video logs showed the procedures in disturbing detail, volunteers lying on tables while machines rebuilt their bodies piece by piece, children being born with modifications already in place, adults choosing to undergo procedures that would fundamentally change what they were. "This video is from year 75, Quental translated, her voice shaking. "They're describing something called neural network integration. The subject is having their nervous system connected to the colony's computer network. They say it will allow instantaneous communication and shared consciousness." The video showed a human woman, though she barely looked human anymore. Her skin had a strange metallic sheen. Her eyes glowed with an internal light. Cables ran from ports in her skull to machines that hummed with electronic activity. "I volunteer for the integration protocol," the woman said in the recording, "for the survival and advancement of our species." The procedure took 6 hours. When it was complete, the woman opened her eyes and smiled. But it wasn't a human smile anymore. It was something else entirely. "Integration successful," she reported. "I can access the colony network directly. I can feel the thoughts of the other integrated subjects. We are becoming something greater than human." More videos showed the progression over the decades. The humans had developed what they called adaptive evolution protocols. Instead of waiting for natural selection to improve their species, they were directing their own evolution in real time. Phase 2 involved biological optimization, Quental continued translating. Enhanced strength, improved reflexes, modified sensory organs. They increased their physical capabilities beyond normal, human limits. The evidence was everywhere. Exercise equipment designed for beings much stronger than baseline humans. Environmental suits built to protect enhanced bodies from conditions that would kill normal people. Training programs that would be impossible for unmodified individuals. To complete, Phase 3 was psychological modification, she read from another log. They altered their own emotional responses, pain tolerance, and learning capabilities. They removed what they called inefficient human limitations, like fear, doubt, and individual selfishness. That discovery made Veltar's blood run cold. The humans hadn't just changed their bodies. They had modified their minds, their personalities, their fundamental nature. They had engineered themselves to be more efficient, more focused, more dangerous. The third underground level contained the most disturbing discovery of all, the symbiosis labs. Here, the humans had learned to merge with the planet's native life forms. Not just domestication or genetic modification, but actual biological fusion. The logs described procedures where humans had plants and animals grafted directly into their bodies, creating hybrid organisms that shouldn't have been able to exist. Subject 247 has successfully integrated with the native spine moss, read one log. The plant tissue now functions as an external nervous system, providing enhanced sensory input and rapid communication with other plant networks across the planet. Videos showed humans with bark-like skin that could photosynthesize sunlight. Others had developed symbiotic relationships with the planet's predatory insects, using them as living tools and weapons. Some had merged so completely with native life forms that they barely looked human at all. They turned themselves into living ecosystems, Terwell observed with scientific fascination and personal revulsion. Each individual became a combination of human, plant, animal, and machine. They created a new form of life that had never existed before. But the most terrifying discovery came in the final laboratory section. Here, the humans had been working on what they called the collective protocol. They were attempting to merge individual consciousness into a group mind, Krental translated from the final research logs. Not just communication between enhanced individuals, but actual shared consciousness, a human hive mind that could think and act as a single entity, while maintaining individual personalities. The equipment in this section was beyond anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Biological computers that used living tissue as processing units. Neural interfaces that could connect hundreds of minds simultaneously. Tanks filled with a strange organic fluid that seemed to pulse with its own life. According to these logs, they achieved partial success, Krental continued. Small groups of 10 to 20 individuals were successfully linked into collective consciousness units, but they were working towards something much larger. The final video log was the most disturbing of all. It showed a gathering of the colony's entire population in a vast underground chamber. But these weren't humans anymore. They were something else entirely. Tall, graceful beings with metallic skin and glowing eyes. Some had plant growth emerging from their bodies. Others had additional limbs or sensory organs. Today, we begin Phase 4, announced their leader, a being that might once have been human, but now looked like something from a nightmare. The final integration. We will merge our collective consciousness with the planet's ecosystem itself. We will become one with this world, and through that unity, we will become something that has never existed in the galaxy. The video ended there. The final research logs were dated just days later, and then everything stopped. They did it, Veltar realized with growing horror. They actually merged with the planet. That's why the colony appears abandoned. They're not gone. They've become part of the world itself. As if responding to his words, the underground facility's lighting flickered. For a moment, the walls seemed to pulse like living tissue. The air circulation system made sounds that seemed almost like breathing. "Commander," Yartok said urgently, "we need to leave, now." But as they turned to go, they found their path blocked. The stairs they had descended were no longer there. Instead, the walls had grown together, sealing them in. The facility had become a living thing, and it didn't want them to leave. They're not just part of the planet, Veltar realized. They are the planet. The entire world has become one massive organism, and we're inside it. Around them, the walls began to pulse more rapidly. The humans had achieved their goal. They had transcended their individual existence and become something unprecedented in galactic history. Something that was about to decide what to do with their unexpected visitors. The horrors of human ingenuity had created something that defied every natural law the galaxy understood. And now that something was awake, the walls around them rippled like water, and Veltar felt his heart racing as he realized the truth. The colony wasn't abandoned. The humans were still here, but they had become something far beyond what his team could have imagined. "Stay calm," he ordered his crew, though his own voice betrayed his fear. "Don't make any sudden movements." The facility's lighting shifted from normal white to a warm organic glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The air grew thick with a sweet scent that reminded Veltar of flowers, but with an underlying metallic tang that made his nose burn. Then they heard the voice. It came from everywhere at once, the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath their feet. Not spoken through speakers, but resonating through the living structure that surrounded them. The voice was human in its basic structure, but it carried harmonics and overtones that no single throat could produce. "Welcome, visitors from the stars," the collective voice said in perfect Zephyrian. "We have been waiting for you." Krental's translation equipment went wild, detecting dozens of different languages being spoken simultaneously. English, Mandarin, Spanish, and others that weren't in any galactic database, but somehow the meaning came through clearly in their own language. "We mean no harm," Veltar said to the air around them. "We are explorers from the Galactic Council. We detected signs of life and came to investigate." A sound that might have been laughter echoed through the chamber. "We know who you are, Commander Veltar of the exploration vessel Distant Star. We have been monitoring your communications since you entered this system. We know about your ship, your crew, your mission, and your technology." The walls began to shift, flowing like thick liquid. Shapes formed in the organic matter, faces that were almost human, but not quite, eyes that glowed with internal light, mouths that smiled with too many teeth. "You want to know what happened to the humans who built this colony?" the voice continued. "We are what happened. We are what they became. We are what humanity chose to be." One of the wall faces spoke directly to Veltar. It looked female, though. Its skin had the texture of bark and its hair moved like living vines. "I was Sarah Chen, chief biologist of Haven Colony. I volunteered for the first integration protocols. Now I am part of something much larger." Another face formed beside the first, this one appearing more masculine but with metallic skin and eyes like stars. "I was David Martinez, colony engineer. I designed the systems that allowed us to merge with this world's ecosystem. My consciousness lives on in every circuit, every power conduit, every integrated system." More faces appeared, dozens of them, each telling the story of their transformation. The humans hadn't died or disappeared. They had chosen to abandon individual existence and become part of a collective organism that spanned the entire planet. "Why?" asked Veltar. "Why give up your humanity?" "Because humanity was never enough," replied the collective voice. "Individual consciousness is limited, fragile, temporary. We were trapped in bodies that could be damaged, minds that could only hold so much knowledge, lives that ended far too soon. So we chose to become something better." The chamber around them shifted again, walls flowing apart to reveal a vast space filled with organic machinery. Living computers pulsed with bioluminescent displays. Networks of vines and cables carried information at the speed of thought. The entire facility was alive, conscious, thinking. "We retained our individual personalities," the collective explained. "Sarah still loves botany. David still enjoys solving engineering problems, but now we share all knowledge, all experience, all capability. We are simultaneously one consciousness and 300 distinct individuals." Terwell stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "The biological integration. How did you overcome the rejection responses? The DNA incompatibilities?" Multiple faces smiled at once. "By not fighting them," said what had once been Sarah Chen. "We didn't force foreign biology to accept human tissue. We modified human tissue to accept foreign biology. We became something new, something that could exist in perfect harmony with this world." Mon Cool examined the living machinery around them. "This technology is beyond anything in our databases. How did you develop it so quickly?" "Time moves differently when you can think with hundreds of minds simultaneously," replied David Martinez's face. "What would take individual researchers decades to discover, we can solve in days. When every success is shared instantly with the collective, progress becomes exponential." The demonstration of their capabilities was both fascinating and terrifying. The walls around them reconfigured themselves into display screens, showing technical diagrams. The collective had analyzed every piece of Zephyrian technology brought down by the landing party. In just 3 days, they had reverse-engineered devices that had taken the Zephyrian people centuries to develop. "Your energy. Weapons use a crystalline matrix to focus plasma discharge," the collective observed casually. "Efficient, but limited by power storage. We can improve the design by 37% using organic superconductors." As they spoke, the walls extruded a device that looked similar to Yartok's sidearm, but was clearly superior. The security chief examined it with professional interest and growing alarm. "This is better than anything our military engineers have produced," he admitted. "The power output is incredible, and the targeting system is..." "How did you integrate biological neural networks with quantum processors?" "We are the integration," the collective replied. "Every technology we encounter becomes part of us. Every problem we face becomes a challenge for hundreds of connected minds. We learn, we adapt, we improve. That is what we have become." Veltar felt a chill of recognition. The humans had become something that could absorb and improve any technology they encountered. They were living examples of adaptation taken to its ultimate extreme. "What do you want from us?" he asked. The chamber fell silent for a long moment. When the collective spoke again, their voice carried a note of something that might have been longing. "For 200 years we have been alone," they said. "Cut off from the greater galaxy, developing in isolation. We have become something unprecedented, something unique. But we have also become lonely." The faces in the walls showed expressions of sadness. Individual consciousness seeks connection with others like itself. Even collective consciousness requires interaction with other forms of awareness. We have perfected our existence on this world, but we hunger for new experiences, new challenges, New forms of life to understand and potentially integrate with. You want to leave this planet, Veltar realized. We want to return to the galaxy, the collective confirmed, not as conquerors, but as explorers. We want to meet the species that have evolved since humanity's supposed extinction. We want to share knowledge, to learn about the wonders that exist beyond this world. Krental spoke up nervously. The Galactic Council has strict protocols about species integration. Biological modification beyond certain limits is considered dangerous. What you've become would be classified as a potential threat. The collective's laughter was like wind through leaves. We know. We have been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We understand that what we have become frightens other species. The concept of voluntary loss of individual identity violates fundamental principles that most cultures hold sacred. Then, why reveal yourselves to us? Asked Veltar. Because hiding has become pointless, the collective replied. We have detected similar energy signatures from 17 other star systems, other human colonies that escaped Earth's destruction, other groups that have been developing in isolation for centuries. Humanity was never truly extinct, and soon the galaxy will discover that fact. The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. If there were other human colonies, other groups that had undergone similar transformations, then the galaxy was about to face something it was completely unprepared for. Each colony developed differently, the collective continued. Some pursued technological enhancement, others focused on genetic optimization, some developed psychic abilities. Each group adapted to their environment and circumstances in their own way, but all of them have been preparing for the day when they would return to galactic civilization. And that day is now? Veltar asked. Soon, the collective confirmed. Your arrival here has triggered communication protocols that have been dormant for decades. Even now, signals are being sent to our scattered cousins. The children of Earth are waking up and they are ready to reclaim their place among the stars. The living walls around them pulsed with new activity. Data streams flowed through organic conduits. Communication networks that spanned multiple star systems came online. The collective was reaching out to colonies that had been silent for centuries, and they were responding. What will happen to us? Veltar asked quietly. The collective considered this question with hundreds of minds working in perfect harmony. That depends on you, Commander. You can report what you have found here and warn the galaxy about the return of humanity, or you can help us make contact with the Galactic Council in a way that might lead to peaceful coexistence. And if we try to stop you? You cannot stop what has already begun, the collective replied gently. But we would prefer to proceed with cooperation rather than conflict. We were human once. We remember what it was like to be individuals. Veltar stood in the center of the living chamber, surrounded by the collective consciousness that had once been human, and made the most difficult decision of his life. We need to return to our ship, he said carefully. We need time to process what we've learned here. The collective considered this request with the patience of beings who thought at speeds far beyond individual consciousness. The walls pulsed gently, and the organic displays showed data streams flowing between different sections of the planet-wide organism. We understand, the collective replied. This has been overwhelming for you. But before you leave, there are things you must know. Things about what is coming. The chamber reconfigured itself once again, walls flowing apart to create a vast spherical space. The inner surface became a display showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were highlighted in different colors. These are the human colonies, the collective explained. Each dot represents a group of survivors who escaped Earth's destruction. Red indicates technological development. Blue shows biological modification. Green represents psychic evolution. Purple marks mixed development. Veltar stared at the map in horror. The scattered dots covered nearly a quarter of the galaxy. There weren't just a few human colonies. There were hundreds of them. How is this possible? Whispered Krental. The evacuation records from Earth showed only a few dozen ships escaped. The official records were incomplete, the collective replied. Many groups left Earth without reporting their destinations. Some departed years before the official evacuation began. Others used experimental technology that wasn't registered with any authority. Humanity scattered across the galaxy like seeds, on the wind. The map zoomed in on specific systems, showing detailed information about each colony. Some had developed advanced artificial intelligence. Others had created living technology that surpassed anything the Galactic Council had imagined. A few had evolved beyond physical existence entirely, becoming pure energy beings. Each colony faced different challenges, the collective continued. Each adapted in different ways, but all of them shared one common trait: the human drive to survive, to improve, to overcome any obstacle through determination and ingenuity. The red colonies pursued technological transcendence, explained a face that appeared in the wall beside them. They merged with artificial intelligence, created bodies of living metal, developed weapons that could destroy star systems. They became something that most species would call machine gods. Another face formed, this one showing features that seemed to shift between human and something else entirely. The blue colonies chose biological perfection. They modified themselves to survive in any environment, to heal from any injury, to live for thousands of years. They became the ultimate predators, perfectly adapted to any world they choose to inhabit. A third face appeared, its eyes glowing with an inner light that seemed to see beyond normal dimensions. The green colonies developed psychic abilities. They learned to read minds, to manipulate matter with thought alone, to travel between dimensions. They became something that exists partially outside normal space and time. And the purple colonies combined all approaches, the collective said. Like us, they became something entirely new, something that has never existed in galactic history. Veltar felt sick as he realized the implications. The galaxy was about to face not one unprecedented species, but dozens of them. Each human colony had become something that challenged the natural order in different ways. Why reveal this to us? He asked. Why not continue hiding? Because hiding is no longer possible, the collective replied. Our psychic colonies have detected the approach of a galactic threat that will require all species to work together. A force from beyond this galaxy that seeks to consume all organic life. The display changed, showing images that came from sources Veltar couldn't identify. Massive ships of unknown design moving between galaxies. Worlds stripped of all life, leaving nothing but empty rock floating in space. Entire star systems going dark as something consumed their energy. The Devourers, the collective said simply. They have consumed 3 galaxies already. They will arrive here within 50 years. When they do, every species in this galaxy will face extinction unless we work together to stop them. How do you know this? Demanded Yartok. Our psychic colonies have seen the future, the collective replied. Not all possible futures, but the most likely ones. The Devourers cannot be stopped by any single species, no matter how advanced. They require the combined efforts of every form of consciousness in the galaxy. The horrifying truth began to dawn on Veltar. The human colonies hadn't been developing in isolation just for their own benefit. They had been preparing for a war that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know was coming. That's why you're revealing yourselves now, he realized. You need the Galactic Council's help. And they need ours, the collective confirmed. The conventional weapons and defenses of Council species will not be enough. The Devourers have faced and consumed civilizations far more advanced than anything currently in this galaxy. Only the unconventional abilities that humanity has developed can provide the edge needed for victory. The chamber filled with new displays, showing battle plans, weapon designs, and strategic analyses that were beyond anything Veltar had ever seen. The collective had been preparing for this conflict for decades, developing technologies and capabilities specifically designed to fight an enemy that consumed life itself. The technological colonies can create weapons that exist partially outside normal space-time, the collective explained. The biological colonies can develop life forms that are immune to the Devourer's consumption methods. The psychic colonies can coordinate defense efforts across galactic distances instantaneously. And your colony? Asked Monkul. We can integrate all approaches, the collective replied. We can take the best technologies, the most effective biological adaptations, the strongest psychic abilities, and combine them into something even more powerful. We are the synthesis that humanity has been working toward for 200 years. Veltar understood now why this discovery should have stayed hidden. Not because the evolved humans were a threat to the galaxy, but because the galaxy wasn't ready to accept the help it desperately needed. The Council species will never accept this, he said. The idea of working with modified humans, with collective consciousness, with beings that have abandoned individual identity. It violates everything they believe about the nature of consciousness and civilization. We know, the collective said sadly. That is why we need ambassadors. Beings like you who have seen what we truly are, who understand that we are not monsters, but the next stage of human evolution. You must help the galaxy prepare for what is coming. And if we refuse? The collective's silence stretched for long moments. When they finally spoke, their voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then the galaxy will face the Devourers unprepared and will be consumed as the other galaxies were. Humanity will reveal itself anyway, but it will be too late for cooperation. We will fight the final battle alone, and even if we win, the cost will be the extinction of every other form of consciousness in this galaxy. Veltar felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He could report what he had found and recommend that the Council prepare for contact with the evolved human colonies. He could help establish communication protocols that might lead to cooperation, or he could recommend a military response that would inevitably fail and doom the galaxy to destruction. You're asking us to trust beings that have abandoned everything we consider sacred about individual consciousness, he said. We're asking you to trust that humanity's greatest strength has always been adaptation, the collective replied. We adapted to survive on this world. We adapted to become something greater than human. Now we must all adapt to face a threat, greater than any species has ever encountered. The chamber began to shift again, walls flowing upward to create an exit passage. But before Veltar and his team could leave, the collective made one final revelation. There is one more thing you should know, they said. Earth was not destroyed by a natural stellar event. The Devourers sent advanced scouts to test humanity's defenses. The humans who remained on Earth died fighting the first probe. The colonies scattered not because their sun went supernova, but because they knew what was coming and needed time to prepare. The revelation hit Veltar like a physical blow. Everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity's extinction was a lie. The humans had been fighting this war for 300 years, and the rest of the galaxy had never even known it existed. The probe's attack on Earth created the stellar explosion that the galaxy recorded as a natural event, the collective continued, but it also provided cover for humanity's evacuation. The Devourers believe they succeeded in eliminating human civilization. They do not know about the colonies. That ignorance is our greatest advantage. As Veltar's team emerged from the underground facility, they found the surface colony had changed. Buildings had reconfigured themselves into something that looked more like a spaceport than a research station. Living ships grew from organic landing pads, their biomechanica.